Welcome to episode 37 of the What's Up podcast, recorded by Auld Reekie Astro. It's the 31st of May, 2019. It's been a rather long couple of weeks for us here, so today's topics are going to be covering what's making us feel really old, the wrinkles, blemishes, and the amount of reminiscing that we've been getting up to. Obviously, the question is, who are we?
I'm Ali. Hi, all.
Hello, and I'm William.
And my name is Martin. We're the usual hosts of this podcast. So let's kick off with this week's topics, talking about wrinkles. William.
You are looking a bit more wrinkly.
Thanks,
than
gents.
anything.
Yeah,
The
grey
bags.
hairs, all those things. These are even more old age wrinkles occurring on a spherical body nearby. So these are the moon.
Is he talking about us?
The moon is shrinking, which is a bit of a shock, and has been revealed, well, recently, paper which has come out, which has managed to show some excellent evidence that over the last, I think it was a few million years, the moon might shrink by about 50 meters. So it's not getting much smaller in the night sky, don't worry.
This isn't a good crash diet to go on to get that summer body ready.
No, not quite. No. Hang on, you're getting confused. Wrinkles, diets, no.
Wait, you're losing heat instead of weight. Is that why the moon's shrinking? No. It's cooling down, right?
Yes, effectively, yeah. So yeah, it's cooling, and as it cools, it shrinks. It's still cooling, which is amazing, really, considering it's 4.5 billion years old since its creation. But it's still effectively...
Looks all right for 4.5 billion.
Yeah. It's effectively still shrinking. It's a little bit battered, isn't it?
That's true.
But the beauty of this, and I think a very exciting thing about this, is that they have shown this result using data taken by Apollo equipment on the moon. How cool is that? When the Apollo astronauts visited, most of the missions, if not all of the missions, put down...
The press release, for some reason, 17 got
Wasn't
ignored.
there? Yeah.
Maybe they had enough seismometers or something by that point. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, so he's just given the punchline. But they put seismometers. So they put down devices to measure moonquakes, not earthquakes here, moonquakes, down on the surface of the moon. One of them broke relatively quickly for some reason. But 4 of them continued working for quite a long time, like 7 or 8 years or something. And so they got a whole slew of data. And in that time, they measured things. They saw that there were moonquakes. They were looking very positive.
Point of curiosity. So here on Earth, the tectonic plates move around, and that's what gives us our earthquakes. Now, am I right in thinking that that's not the same for the moon?
Yes, I think so. That there aren't plates in the same way. The crust is more one solid mass, but with the potential for shrinkage. And that creates, presumably in the same way that our plates on the Earth are moving around, but they don't move in a uniform, I'm not a geologist, they don't move at a nice sort of smooth flow. They get sort of stuck, and then you'll get a sort of sudden jerk when the two things kind of slip past each other. So that causes your quake. In a similar way, presumably the shrinkage of the moon isn't a perfectly uniform, it gets smaller by a fraction of a millimeter every million years. It suddenly goes and kind of, that's my technical term, shakes.
but that's what makes you wrinkly as a moon.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
Obviously you've got wrinkles from other processes, but you can actually see lines in the moon's surface from that happening. It's kind of cool.
So this is the current bit, because obviously you might say, well, hang on, this data was taken 50 years ago. Why is it only just been discovered now? They saw the earthquakes, moonquakes, all that time ago, but they have been studying, a group have been studying very, very brilliant imagery from the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, which is wonderful. It's a thing which has been nipping around the moon recently and has been taking great imagery of the landing sites and all aspects of it.
If you're in a rush, just Google moon. And most of that is LRO,
LRO
data, so you can very quickly play around with it, and there's other ways to get at it, but that's a very quick one.
Even if you're not in a rush, just Google
It's
moon.
quite nice because all the astronaut photos, like the panoramas that they took, you can double click on them and it drops you in, and so the picture sort of wraps around your screen, and you're like, whoa! So there is a lot of pretty stuff in there. So it's not just LRO.
Yeah, and the LRO is, I can't remember what it is, but it's a few meters of resolution on this. No, it must be higher than that, isn't it? It's getting.
It's got 2 different modes. So there's a low resolution entire surface map, and the really high resolution stuff you've got to work harder to dig into that. But I think for all the fun sites, Google Moon's got a good chunk of that. So
so they've used LRO data to look, and they've seen these sort of regions where there seem to be sort of odd ridges along the moon's surface, which are not huge. These are like meters high. They're not like great mountain ranges like our tectonic plate system on the Earth is created, but just sort of wrinkles, little wrinkly bits. And the beauty is that they've used the data from the Apollo missions to try and pinpoint where the earthquakes were, and an awful lot of the earthquakes which they detected back then, they can now see were relatively close to where these regions of shrinkage, where these lines are, which is just a great. I know it's like a 50-year science experiment, and
it's sort of made the moon seem a bit alive.
Yeah,
because they're like, I think the article it was like it's dynamic. It's actually having rumbles, and some of the rumbles were not small as well.
Yeah.
Like you could occasionally get quite a serious.
There's something like a magnitude 5 earthquake equivalent.
Does anyone know how heavy that is? Does that make a table shake?
I think it does.
Like, okay, so you would feel that obviously,
yes.
but
I think if you get magnitude, you get woken up by a 5 quake if it's nearby.
Okay,
it's not going to knock down a building, but it's it's noticeable.
You'd sit up and take notice for sure.
You would. If you're on the moon and there's nothing else happening, and it's suddenly a 5 quake rippled by. So the other thing is that looking at these regions, you can see, because with the lunar surface, the newly exposed surface is kind of brighter and whiter. So if you look at something like Tycho crater, which is the awesome big crater that's southern towards the south of the moon, you can see these radial lines where there's all this stuff thrown out, and which is whiter and brighter. And in the same way, along these fault lines, they think they can see regions where there's been sort of material, like rock flows or boulders, sort of have moved, and so you've got fresh material has been exposed by these quakes along these lines, which is, again, just it's a really lovely kind of combination.
I should probably put in that caveat that it looks white to us, but on average everything's the colour of dirty tarmac. I think
it's marginally less dirty tarmac.
Yeah, and because of the contrast and the fact that you've got the full glare of the sun on it, our eyes aren't very good at seeing that sort of relative shift between the shades.
Yeah,
but,
so
it's mostly a dull grey colour.
With time it'll get darker, so it's whiter on the moon, generally speaking, means newer. I think is a reasonable simplification, but I'm not really new. I mean, still maybe tens, hundreds of thousands of years.
I think the seas, I might be wrong on this, but I'm used to that. I think the seas are darker in general because there's more. It's more iron rich. The basaltic stuff that's filled those in.
The seas are different, aren't they?
That is a slight change again, but in general, that's true. Yeah.
Well, I was going to mention this later on in the blemishes section of the podcast, but LRO, sticking with LRO, has found the Beer Sheet crash site. So this was the Israeli moon lander that successfully landed, just harder than expected, so crashed is another way to put it. But at that crash site, there's a big white area around the craft because it kicked up all that dust just underneath.
Yeah.
So that is properly fresh. But of course, because the moon has so little variation on it in terms of there's no weathering, there's no aging of the material necessarily, that looks really crisp white, which looks a lot like these ridges and things that you see. So it shows that is just material that's come from underneath the top layer, exposed, and it is this much brighter colour.
Here's a near real-time test that theory is correct.
Yeah. Well, during Apollo, they had a lot of fun because I don't think they did this for the earlier couple, but once a few of the seismometers were down, they were able to remote pilot the Saturn 4B. So that's kind of just the shell that held the LEM and did the final bit to get them into orbit. They could actually direct that to actually impact the moon's surface. And I think they were able to register those on the seismometers. So it's an object of known mass. And those holes are in the LRO data as well. So
that's quite cool because they use those things also for detecting meteorite impacts that you would see sort of, unlike a quake, which would be a bit of a sort of a low rumble, you've got kind of poof events, which, sorry, I don't know why the sound effects today are going to be hard for editing. You kind of got these more kind of instant effects, which were meteorite impacts.
So a short, sharp one.
Yes.
That's more of a meteorite hitting.
That would be a better thing to say, short, sharp. I like that.
But you can even tell if they're shallow or deep and stuff, right? And these are all shallow, right? Yes. It's just right on the crust and because it's such a small change.
And so I wonder if actually crashing the Saturn 4B, as you say, that's a known mass, known speed. It gives you a calibration point for when you're trying to work out, well, we just heard a ping, how big was that rock? It's like, well, how does it compare to the Saturn? That's quite cool.
Yeah, but as with all things moon related, somebody fell down an article rabbit hole, and there was actually they had seismic charges. The astronauts apparently were deploying seismic charges to calibrate the seismometers.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But they didn't get set off until they left. So the literal explosive charges left behind. And now, apologies if this is wrong because I haven't had a chance to double check that. But I read it in an article as I was trawling through stuff to find out something else. And I was like, wow, okay. So like, not only did they bring plutonium with them, which I think is one of the reasons why these things had power for as long as they did. They had, because I don't think solar panels were used at all in Apollo.
No, so that's just
I think people just assume solar panels were there all the time for these kind of missions, but that's not the case. And yeah, so it turns out they were bringing some genuinely dangerous bits of kit with them, and I can see why they would wait till they left before they set off the calibration charges. But I don't know how big they were. I mean, it's maybe just a little under the soil kind of thing. Or
I think regardless, though, you're going to spend 3 days in a transit van volume with 2 other people traveling to the moon with a nuclear reactor. Oh yeah, and can you bring this small bomb along with you as well, please?
Yeah, and we're not going to let you roll down any windows. That's
like that is just, of all the things you could bring, here's a small bomb. It's not high on my list. That is a brave move.
It might be a really dinky wee bomb. I don't know. But
we need to find this out.
I don't think it matters at that point.
I think we should return to this point. How big were the charges they left?
I don't know that. I promise I will find out, because I sense we're going to have to do an actual, Apollo 11 anniversary special or something, aren't we? So that we may have to take you to the moon and back and be a bit silly with it as much as possible. So we can give you all our favorite tidbits, I guess, including the smells.
Well,
it's a fully immersive experience. Sorry, carry on.
Sticking with the reminiscing that we've already started doing with the Apollo missions, what else do you want to reminisce about?
Well, it's quite nice because, given that NASA have just announced recently that they're going to go back, and China are already talking about going back as well, it's sort of quite prescient that we're now a full 50 years on from the Apollo 11 mission. So that's the 20th of July is the big day where Neil and Buzz got their names in the history books. But there's a lot of stuff happening, and I'm really excited because there's been way more buzz around this than I might have naively expected. I was a bit of an Apollo nerd. And I thought it might just sort of pass and we'd see America doing some really fun stuff. But there's like loads of Apollo-themed things happening up and down. There's a website called, rubbish, I've forgotten. It's Go Stargazing, I think. But if you Google Apollo 50th Anniversary UK 2019 or something to that effect, this Go Stargazing website seems, I'm not sure who maintains it, but they've done a really good job of pulling together every single event that the UK is currently hosting that has a moon landing theme to it, and you get a wee map and you can go and find your nearest science centre or your nearest sort of public talk. I believe we may be in there for one at Dynamic Earth later. But it's really handy because the science centres have got little bits of kit. You've got the don't forget the new movies coming out. As far as Edinburgh is concerned, that'll be the cameo in the film house at least. I don't know if it's getting a more general release, but that's the film called Apollo 11. And this is going to be fun because it'll drive the conspiracy theorists nuts, because they've literally found a box of film footage that nobody's seen for 50 years, and they found it, remastered it, and apparently it's stunning. I've heard nothing but good things about this film, and I cannot wait to go and see it. So that's high on my list.
So you're saying they've actually refaked a whole nother box worth of footage? My God, the dedication of these people! They go back and make a whole new set of fake.
There's
things.
the occasional, the occasional chain of events that makes you go, it's not making our job any easier. Because there was one of the things that made me sad was that the original magnetic tape that contained the actual received data from Neil Armstrong's first footsteps on the moon seemed to have gone missing, and I think even NASA admitted they couldn't figure out where that had ended up. And it wasn't, I don't think it was just outright negligence. I think genuinely somebody went, we better look after that. So they put it in a safe room somewhere, and it may have just been mislabeled or has been overwritten. At the time, those tapes were not cheap and they needed them for all the other Apollo missions. But as it turns out, if they'd hung on to those, that footage could have been much, much clearer and prettier to us. We could have remastered it in a similar fashion to how you can remaster analog film. And so we've lost something a little bit priceless, which is a shame. So then the fact that they found this treasure trove is like, yay, we've got some new stuff. And, we're like the rest of the planet. We're going to be taken along with that, and we'll feel like we're kind of in the room a little bit more. And I'm genuinely excited about that, because documentaries up until now have been very much looking back, and the footage has been quite grainy, and occasionally you get it polished up, like In the Shadow of the Moon did a good job. That's another good one to go and find if you can see that getting screened anywhere. But yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff happening. So my reminiscing is sort of nice because it's very timely and it's got everybody looking at the moon again and going, wouldn't it be cool? Just get back there again and obviously up the diversity count of human beings that are stepping on the surface.
Wouldn't be hard.
So it would not be hard.
So, but it is what people are dedicated to do. So NASA have also announced, I believe NASA announced it, that they intend to be back on the moon's surface by 2024 with the first female American astronaut to walk on the moon.
Yeah, and I think it's a very valid reason for going back without, never mind anything else. You know, the legacy value of getting people back into science and engineering, all the jobs you create by trying to do human exploration. As scientists, I think, well, for myself anyway, I'm aware that you can send more robotic missions to far-flung places and not risk any lives doing it. But I do think there is a sort of a very useful sort of engagement sort of legacy with all this kind of human exploration stuff. And as much as I love the ISS, it's always been a little bit directionless in terms of what it was there for or why we need it. And sometimes it's just like, go to the moon, learn how to do that again, go to Mars. And that seems to be the current timeline. And they're also talking about fun mission parameters, which may change. Like, you know, it's not going to be the Apollo style where you sort of rendezvous in lunar orbit. Or if you do a rendezvous, they're calling it like this lunar gateway. Have you seen
the gateways?
Yeah, but they've really not specified what that means. It sounds like they're wanting an orbital station in lunar orbit that's a potential staging post. And the gateway is designed to get there autonomously, so you can save a lot on fuel and you can use ion thrusters. And you know, I think that's the order of the day. Is our rockets aren't as big as Saturn V at the moment, so we got to have more bang for buck with what we can fit on top of those rockets. So that on its own is going to be a lot of fun engineering-y things to solve and lots of messes to be made too.
I think it's interesting you say about you could send robots. You could, but what we've just been talking about, like actually the Apollo astronauts went and put seismometers on there. They set off detonators. They did so many things whilst they were on the moon. They brought back nearly 400 kilos of lunar rock. They drove around, took pictures. They found different types of rock.
Well, if they'd stayed behind, we could have got an easy another 50 kilos or something there. That's a lot of fuel you're saving right there.
But just in the sense of to build a robot to do all the things that one astronaut can do on the surface. You're looking skeptically at me, mine, but I think it's damn tricky to do that.
I think that's true, but I question, could I send 10 dedicated robots rather than one human? Would those 10 dedicated robots be better than one human? And I'm not sure.
I agree, yeah, the jury's out, I think.
InSight studies that we just described. InSight's laid seismometers and everything else.
It has.
And done more science, and will be there to do long-term science, which you can't do with humans in the same way. Okay, you need to give them food and water and keep them alive and all that kind of gubbins, and get them back at some point. But I agree that doing human spaceflight is more important in some ways. But is it more bang for your buck? If scientifically bang for your buck, I don't think so.
It's really hard to quantify that stuff, isn't it? So people have tried and done the sort of modern day cost of Apollo and everything. And for those of you who might be worried that this is just going to waste money, it's not. You're not really setting fire to the money in a big pile. We've used that argument before, but it's all salaries mainly. I mean, the hardware itself is comparatively tiny fraction of what you're spending. A lot of this is the people that you need to actually design what you need and get it built. And it's hard to sort of moan about that. I mean, that's a lot of high-tech jobs.
You can't moan about
that. Well, okay. But then
I'm not saying you should, because we're getting paid on those kind of salaries. But then you can't moan about it.
I think, it's part of what it means to be human too. So there's another key point, and you've just given me a skeptical face there, William, sir. But it's like telling a composer not to compose or an artist not to paint, or we are human beings. And once we have figured out how to survive, and by the way, take care of the planet, which I think is arguably the thing we should be spending all our money on right now. There's still leftovers for doing this kind of fun stuff, and if we don't, we're not human anymore. That kind of thing. So that's it's quite deep and philosophical for me, who's tired and feeling old.
And of course, all these technologies aren't developed in vacuum, although a lot of them are developed for vacuum.
Right.
There is spin-outs that come from all this technological development, from all these sort of lofty mission goals that have far more real impact in day-to-day life, in environment, whatever you want to describe. There's probably some way of linking it back to these grand space exploration method.
Yeah.
So it's not a simple concept by any means.
So I think that maybe one set of numbers we should put in, just for a better perspective, is when Apollo was at its height, it was drawing about 4.5% of the US federal budget. Today, NASA get less than 0.5%. So just to put in perspective what sort of a task they're now embarking on, without a significant increase in funding, they might struggle. But I also think there's ways you can make that as efficient as possible. But it's just, I'm trying to sort of point out, this is a mammoth task. It's not, the moon is far away. And we will talk more about that next month.
Okay, so just on this, we're going to ask, in recording for posterity, what's everyone's bets on the 2024 date coming true?
On a marks out of 10 or
a 1 in whatever number you want to say. We'll go with Ali first.
I want it to be higher, but I think there's a 1 in 5, 1 in 10 chance maybe. It's like I'm not overly confident that time that's not going to slide. It's like 2024 seems awfully close, given this gateway thing doesn't even exist yet. So, yeah.
William?
By the end of 2024?
Yeah.
Give it 1 in 10,000.
Oof.
Not a chance.
Take that.
Not a chance.
It's possible China's already done a lot of the legwork.
Yeah.
So,
okay,
but it's this for the NASA one.
Well, I'm going to say someone.
Okay.
Someone.
Okay.
Okay, let's do NASA first.
Yeah.
And then we'll do. So I'm going to say a 1 in 5 for NASA doing
1 in 5.
From people I've spoken to, he says, rubbing his collar, like my contacts.
I've got pals.
There's quite a lot of confidence in this, and that could be bravado. That would be very American.
Can we count a flyby as a return?
I want
footsteps?
boots on the ground.
And just for the record, January the 1st, 2025
doesn't count.
Doesn't count.
No.
That's a failure. And
I'm happy to be wrong.
This odds book.
Okay, so that was for NASA doing it. What about just someone?
I think if you include anybody, so bearing in mind that's probably China, I think the odds double. So I would maybe say there's a 1 in 4 chance, maybe 1 in 2 is as much. No, I don't think so.
Still going to 2024.
I'm a sort of 33% chance by 2024. I think I want it to be so. So I'm going to.
The rocket to do it doesn't yet exist.
I think we should put our money where our mouth is here, gentlemen.
The rocket doesn't exist.
Well, to be fair, you can launch an Apollo with 2 Falcon Heavies as long as you join them together when they get up there. I'm not saying that's what you would want to do, but yeah.
Okay. If on the day someone sets foot, the next person sets a boot on the ground, we owe each other a pint.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, this is
a good
wager.
Actually, I didn't say a pint of what.
Pint of whiskey.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. A malt. We're getting single malts. Winners and losers all.
Instantly, if I my caveat, my answer, I'm not saying I don't think it could be done. I think it's highly unlikely to. Okay. In the sense of if America said we're going to spend 5% of our GDP, I think they might get there by about 2025, maybe. Just. But they ain't going to do that. Not for a minute. And
I admire your healthy skepticism, sir. Yeah, I'm going to do my best to remain glasses half full on this.
We're going to give one last topic just to discuss. It's been quite prescient on Twitter and in the news generally. And that is the launch of the Starlink constellation. So this is a SpaceX program to launch a series of a large network of satellites to provide high speed and keenly low latency broadband to pretty much the entire world using a cluster of satellites in 3 orbital shells in different patterns going around the planet. So you've got essentially full coverage to this network from anywhere on the planet at all times. Now, this is a much bigger project. There's 120,000 satellites or something. 12,000 satellites in the full constellation, and they've launched the first 60. Now, if you watch the launch, this is on their Falcon 9 launcher using a reused fairing, so all actually quite interesting in that regards.
I'll admit I hadn't even heard of it until I saw that picture of it on the thing. So I had clearly not been paying attention to such things.
And they launched 60 simultaneously, which I'm pretty sure is the largest cluster launch ever. There's been a number of cluster launches. That's going to be one of the biggest. And they're all flat satellites with solar panels. They're all like stacked up in this rack.
Very cool. Right.
And then the whole thing launches, And then
you're making it sound like an IKEA flat pack thing.
I tell you, it kind of looks like it, but self-assembly, which would be much nicer for IKEA. And then as it sort of goes out on its orbital trajectory, each of these satellites slowly separate and unfold and begin to work, and then gradually move out into separate areas of their orbit parameters. And they're all designed, they have anti-collision detection built into themselves, so they can maneuver around themselves and other things that they detect coming. So, it kind of removes some of the space debris risks and that kind of stuff, which is all amazing and all actually fantastic work. And I think really interesting things. And there's lots of companies looking at doing this. There's a whole new field of research and things happening in this.
Yeah, so SpaceX are just the first.
Yes.
Yep.
But that's not why it's hit the press quite so heavily. I think particularly in our community,
our press
particularly, our very niche press, is the question of light pollution for astronomical observation. And this is to say that as the satellites pass overhead, the solar panels and the receivers catch sunlight and are visible to telescopes, certainly, and, as shown by this first launch, to the naked eye. And this could be a problem for astronomers.
Discuss.
Pretty much.
I mean, it got a bit heated on Twitter, and a few of the things, maybe we shouldn't be quoting Elon, but he sort of
part of the argument. I think if Elon said something which is blatantly false,
the comments from SpaceX were, particularly what Elon was on Twitter, was that it wouldn't be visible.
He said 0% visibility. Satellites, 5,000 satellites currently, no one ever sees them. So
they were quite dismissive, weren't they? The tweets were sort of like, "Don't worry, stop."
It's like that's just not true. You do see them if you're an astronomer. Yeah. I mean, heck, if you just a relatively you spend some time in a dark sky, you see a satellite.
Yeah. It's a really interesting point because obviously, I don't think we would ever claim to own the night sky any more than anybody else, right? And there are laws in place to sort of stop anybody claiming it for one nation or another. But it's a really interesting debate because this problem is only going to get worse, and SpaceX is arguably in the firing line just because they're the first to do this mega constellation,
and because of his response.
And I think a lot of people right now will be crunching the numbers to get some really specific things. And fair play to astronomy Twitter because they were throwing out estimates left, right, and center. And I was like, okay, I've seen various estimates for how good / bad this might be, and I think one of the ballpark numbers might be something like for LSST, the Large Synoptic Survey Telescope. This is one of our biggest and bestest telescopes that's getting built as we speak, and its job is to survey the entire sky as often as possible. Details therein, but apparently every single picture it takes will have at least one of these satellites in it.
At least, I heard.
Yeah.
And that's just one constellation, and we already have 3,000 active or inactive things up there, not counting debris. So this is actual. So yeah, it's already busy up there, and this is not geostationary. Is that right? So this low Earth orbit is not helping because that obviously reflects more light, and you're getting a bigger hit. But it also is cheaper than sending really huge, expensive things out to geostationary orbit to do the same job. So there's a lot of stuff to talk. I mean, like, where do you stand on this? I mean, I was a bit sad that he dismissed all of ground-based astronomy and said it was rubbish and we should be building all our telescopes in space.
It's just not true. I think you need consultation on it, and I don't think they had. I'm not saying that, as you say, astronomers don't have any right or claim or anything like that, but I think you feel like if you're doing something like this, you should be discussing more widely. And I was intrigued to see things which were saying that he did get a license to do it, but it's from the American federal thing. It's like, well, America definitely don't own the sky. Yeah. You're not putting those satellites over America. You're putting them over the planet.
Yeah.
Hang on, how can your legal system say that? But okay, that's just sounding a little bit kind of.
This gets into the space law.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And we don't have a global body to make that kind of decision.
I guess satellites it's not a new problem, is it? I mean, the astronomers are getting quite good at removing satellite trails from surveys.
As somebody said, it's not disastrous, it's a nuisance. I was like, it's true. But I think, and that's the sort of thing, it's like, actually, if you said, we're going to do this because actually this is bloody good, this is very good for the entire planet. There are a lot of people in the world whose lives will be significantly improved by getting access to broadband. Fair point, actually. So we want to do this. We'd like to talk to your astronomical community and work out how is this going to affect you? Where is the problem? How could we minimize the problem? How could we try and improve things a little bit? It seems a little bit like especially his first response. I think he has responded more positively since, actually.
Okay, I've not.
But his initial response was very much just like, "Shut up! You're talking rubbish." It's like that. You're just
that made
wrong
me cry.
again.
Of course, they have got a lot dimmer as well. It's worth being clear on. When they first launched, they were very bright because of the orbit they were in.
I have to
say,
I thought it was a really pretty video.
Stunning.
Sailing across and sort of twinkling as they went. It was very pretty.
Go to heavensabove.com, which is an awesome website which lets you see where anything is in the night sky. You put in your location, and if it's visible, it will give you direction to look, height above the horizon, time,
everything
brightness.
From the ISS down in terms of size, right? And it's all in there.
You can still track these. Apparently, they're still, because they're all set off in a line, but they've got small thrusters on.
Yes,
Krypton thrusters, which sounds like something from Superman.
But I believe that causes more issues because the fact that they're self-correcting means their orbits are constantly changing. If you're trying to avoid a satellite going through the thing that you really care about in like a half-hour-long exposure, and you want to avoid that, it's much harder for you to guarantee that you're not going to get any contamination. So that's an extra headache for people to try and solve, and I really don't know what the ultimate solution is. So the problem it's going to get messier up there.
It is,
and
and our telescopes are getting better. I mean, part of the reason...
My eyes aren't getting any better, I just thought.
No, but our telescope's getting better. The reason, one of the major funding sources for the LSST, so this big telescope which is going to get affected by these things, is because it will be used to track asteroids. So, things which might come and wallop us at some point. This telescope is going to be the best tool on the planet for detecting smaller asteroids. And we were going to keep being asked that question. Basically, hopefully we've got every asteroid which is over a kilometer. We've got a lot of them which are 300 meters. This thing goes down to 100 meters, I think, in diameter sort of objects. So we're going to keep wanting to do this sort of science, I think. And okay, I'm not suggesting for a minute that astronomers are only tracking asteroids. We are clearly going to use this telescope for other things, but it's not like we're doing it. This is a pretty useful telescope. It's as useful as any telescope gets, in fact, in terms of for the average person.
I was trying to think of how it have affected my observations, because occasionally I do see satellites in the sort of finder images when I'm at the telescope.
Elon said you never see anything.
Well, I think anyone who's ever gone out at night, you can see a whole ton at night these days. It's busy up there, and with us being in northern latitudes, the sun's not that far below the horizon, so
it is worse for us.
That silitey, I speak good England today. That catching the satellite thing lasts for a lot longer the further north you go, so that's interesting.
So that's the only reasons you place satellite tracking stations in northern and southern latitudes, is because they're easier to spot.
Oh, I see. Yeah, because you've got more sun bouncing off.
Yeah.
So if a satellite had blown through my spectrograph, essentially, so it's just it's like a narrow slit on the sky, and you get the starlight to fall into the slit, and you turn it into a big rainbow. It's a very cool job. But if the satellite had come through, I would have a slice of what looks like a solar spectrum on my target, and I would have no way of easily correcting for that. So I would see solar features where I was hoping not to see features. So it's interesting how it impacts in different ways on different instruments. But it's something you could potentially correct for if you knew it's happening.
Yeah. Just throw away that data start again, probably. Yeah. Nuisance, not a disaster.
It's at this point, these things are midges, not mosquitoes.
That's a good analogy. I like that.
You just got to be careful that they don't evolve into something more. Because, at this point they're midges, but what comes next? What are the next satellite networks work? Are they bigger? Are they bigger satellites? Are they faster?
I tell you what,
are they brighter?
Anyone that's ever gone insane in a midgie swarm, like that might be the right analogy to use, because a few midgies, you don't know it, but at that moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I'm in a cloud of literally a million of these things, and it's like the Alfred Hitchcock film or something. So we might get to that point where our sky is constantly busy. I think you can see that.
Can we be involved in the debate? Yeah, perhaps more than we have been so far. Like, you're going to do this. These are the reasons why. Quite nice if you were kind of careful in. Yeah. Exactly.
I'm also quite glad that you're not allowed to do anything for advertising purposes. Not a giant Coca-Cola sign or something. So that's nice. I think there is legislation, I believe, to stop you doing that for commercial purposes. The RT ones we've talked about in the past.
Yeah, we have.
But compared to this sort of impact, the RT ones are arguably quite small, because it's a single object and it won't stay up there for too long.
Yeah, they would disappear.
So it's very interesting.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, I think you'll hear more about this.
Sure you will. Okay, and time is also fleeting at this point, I think. So we should bring the podcast to a close. And thank you all very much for listening.
Thanks all.
Bye.